going to record it. I'm having issues with the streaming, so if you're watching this video, this is a recording. I don't know when it stopped based on my rambling. We are currently talking about the white horse and the opening of the first seal, and how the white horse is perhaps the most problematic because it's one of two white horses in the book of Revelation. Now, if this were simple, if the book of Revelation were easy, the white horseman would be the same person both times, right? Right? Yeah. Who is the white horseman the second time? Jesus, right? We're not even there. We didn't even read it. But when you think of Bible guy on a white horse, you think Jesus. And the next time we run into a white horseman, it will be Jesus. I promise. Is it Jesus this time?
No.
Well, I've kind of given that away, haven't I? Although it kind of does look like Jesus, right? Okay, he's on a white horse. He's got a crown. He's got a bow, which we'll talk about in just a second here. But how do we know it's not Jesus?
John would tell us?
No, unfortunately, not necessarily. John doesn't always tell us what these things mean.
Because he specifies it later?
He wouldn't be conquering them.
Yeah.
It's more than.
Yeah.
Jesus does not come as a conqueror, right? He comes with peace, right? He came to bring peace, not a sword, right? Now, to understand the white horseman and what's going on here, I have a handout for you. Look at this, it's so exciting. So first I'm going to show you this, and this, you will notice, is in color, and so I only printed one of them. Because this class, as you with the handouts already know, is already, I don't know what my printing budget is, but I'm sure I'm over it. And I'm going to continue to go over it, and I haven't asked to go over it. So it is what it is. This is the Darius cylinder. Some of you might know this man as Darius the Great. He is mentioned in the Bible, although that's not why I brought him up. I brought him up because of the way he looks in this picture. I'll tell you what. You take one and pass it down, right? By the time we're in grade school. Oh, perfect. Yeah, just enough. So what you have is not just a kid's drawing version of it. This is an etching, or a rubbing rather, that someone did. Probably some British museum, because the British have a lot of Achaemenid artifacts for completely unknown and non-empire reasons. So this is the Darius cylinder. The Achaemenids carved a lot of stuff into clay and then buried it under their buildings, which is just interesting. This shows Darius on a hunt, right? Darius is the guy in the back, right? You notice that he's shooting a lion because he's king, and kings kill lions. It's an Achaemenid thing, don't worry about it. There's a weird little creature in the air, and that has exactly nothing to do with Christianity in any way. That is, interestingly enough, that's a Zoroastrian symbol. Very fascinating. It's got Ahura Mazda sort of king elements. From a historical standpoint, very interesting, but not even remotely related to what we're talking about. What we are talking about is what Darius has. He has two things. One, which you will notice, is on top of his head. What's he wearing? Crown. Why is he wearing a crown?
King.
He's king, right? This is easy. You know this, right? The other thing is a bow. Why does he have a bow? Interestingly enough, it's because he's king. It's the same thing as the crown. In Achaemenid intertestamental imagery, kind of this Persian milieu, the bow is the weapon of kings in conquest, right? The Achaemenids, the Persians, fought with bows, primarily, right? How many of you have seen the historical abomination that is 300?
Oh, yeah.
Right, with the Spartans at Thermopylae and all that. They actually have a historical quote, at least as far as we can trust Herodotus, and that is when the Persians are talking to the Spartans, trying to get, and by the way, 1,000 Thracians, which are just completely left out in the movie. Anyway, this is unimportant. Trying to get them to surrender, right? Give up. What does he say? Right? You have no hope, for our arrows will blot out the sun. And of course, what does Leonidas say in one of the, and I understand I'm on recording, but I'm going to do it anyway, in one of the most badass responses ever?
We'll fight in the shade.
So we will fight in the shade. Oh, it's so good. And then they all died. Take it for what it's worth, but it was a cool line, right? This is how Persians fought. This is how Persians conquered, with the bow, right? What took the entire Near East and most of Greece, because by the way to go 300 Spartans, they lost that war. Greece became a client of the Persian Empire, kind of. Really complicated history stuff, really fascinating. It was because of the bow, right? The bow is how the Persians fought, it's how they conquered.
What were
right?
the other ones using? It's just like iron swords?
This was, probably still iron at this point, and so spears, no one used a sword if you didn't have to.
So just they'd have a spear?
Yes, and we're going to have to stop this because I feel just a really long rabbit hole coming on for me to talk about hoplite warfare, and that has nothing to do with the Book of Revelation.
Okay.
So let's talk another time, and we can talk for hours about this, right? I did talk briefly about it in my class on the intertestamental period of the church. This is not on YouTube, unfortunately. You have to go back like a year and a half on Facebook. I'm working very slowly on getting it transferred over. I do.
Thank you for that.
I do go into an extended history examination of hoplite warfare. It's post-hoplite. Hoplite.
Like hop like a bunny?
Yes, that's how it's spelled. It's about the shield.
Okay.
Is it L-I-T?
H-O-P-L-I-T, yes.
Really easy.
Also, I had a sermon on this a year or so ago about the shield wall of faith, right? If you remember that, the shield, the hoplons. Anyway, we are getting far afield in a direction that is wonderful, but not useful.
About the white horse.
This is the white horse.
I want your opinion on something.
Yes.
Don't get it started.
No.
He's getting me back on track. Thank you.
The rider on the white horse is the Antichrist. He arrives in the world at the beginning of the tribulation period. His bow is a picture of his ability to conquer. Although this image is similar to one later in the book, the two should not be confused, and it's always been Satan's purpose to counterfeit the work of Christ.
Okay, I like some of that.
It's a good idea, but...
No. So the only part that I'm not a huge fan of is the identification with the Antichrist.
Yeah, I mean,
But it does imply that the Antichrist could be posing on white horse as a good guy.
it's not a hill to die on.
The fact, oh man. No, this is good. The word Antichrist does not appear in this book. There is no Antichrist in the book of Revelation. The word does not show up. The word does show up in Johannine literature, right? And it's 1 John, where John uses that word Antichrist. If you remember, if you were there for the Antichrist class, for the class on John and his epistles, what is an Antichrist?
Yes, that's what anybody against Christ.
Right, so anyone, specifically John is talking about false teachers in the church, but anyone who works counter to Christ. So I don't like the identification.
Okay.
It's not an uncommon one.
I'm just curious.
But everything else is good. So the conquest we're going to get on to.
Interesting.
They are leaning in a direction. I'm going to guess that they see this as a straight line. So I'm wondering if you got some post-trib kind of stuff going on in there, just based on some of the things that they said. Because we recognize that the white horse, you thought that we'd be done with the horse.
Yeah, because Satan's already...
You thought the white horseman is not Satan. Let's recognize that straight away.
That's right.
Satan does not appear during the 7 seals. Right? He is not present currently. He will show up and we will see him as a counterfeit. And we'll talk very specifically about how he is portraying himself as a counterfeit. By the way, part of that is 666, right? So we'll get there.
I see how someone could arrive at that, but I wouldn't hold it in stone.
So the white horseman here, remember, this is happening from the time of Christ, or Christ's ascension, through to the end. The white horseman here is tyranny and conquest, right? That's where this crown and the bow come in, right? This is a conqueror. a ruler who is a tyrant, is conquering. Oh man, recognize there was a rabbit hole right there about the word tyrant, and we didn't go down it. Look at that! You should be so proud of me.
I like I appreciate your restraint, sir.
Yeah. So this white horseman is symbolic. Because remember, everything is symbolic of tyranny, death, and destruction. Again, from the time of the ascension until the return, as a result of, and this is a little bit of my philosophical state of mind right now, the human will to power, right? People trying to be conquerors, wanting to control land. So, and I'm doing something that I don't want us to do, but I'm going to do it anyway here as an example. The white horse is not the Antichrist. The Antichrist, right? Who is a rider on a white horse?
False prophet.
Not a false prophet. No, we're not talking about prophets here. Oh, you know
Christ.
Oh, no, you're on the second one, Joe. We're on the first horseman. The tyrannical conqueror, right? You guys know these names. We can, well, let's see. Attila the Hun, right? He's post-Christ.
Right. Alexander.
Genghis Khan. Well, Alexander's before, but he would work in this category, right? Hitler, Stalin, right? The British king, because we're Americans, right? Any ruler of the earth who is tyrannical, who's conquering, who is asserting their authority in an oppressive manner.
Especially against religious freedom.
Don't
you think?
No.
You don't.
No, I don't.
Hitler was pretty.
We will talk about religious oppression. Well, that's not what this is focused on. And we'll see this train running through the rest of the four horsemen. What I want you to think with the seven seals, remember, is the suffering of mankind, generally speaking, as a result of the actions of mankind. Now, we will see how the saints suffer as a result of this. That's the fifth seal. That's where we stop, Jack. And again, throughout the book, we will see a more specific and pointed aspect of religious persecution. But that's not really what this is. This is human tyranny and conquest.
So is it just kind of the idea that during the end time that wars will continue to happen? That
Yes.
kind of thing?
Basically. And we're, just because of the next horseman, we need to be a little slightly more precise and not say wars will continue to happen, but tyranny will happen, right? Oh, if you want to be very dramatic, we could say that the bourgeois rulers of France fall under this category too, right? The people la revolution, right? Madame Guillotine, all that good stuff, right? And then, revolution eating its own. Well, here we go, more tyranny, right? Robespierre falls right under the category he was trying to oust, right?
Don't you think, though, that they're really serving Satan? I mean, they're servants of Satan. Evil, let's say evil.
Oh, yeah, this is...
The tyranny comes from evil.
Yes.
But it's kind of, but as you were saying, it's the result of sin, and not all sin stems from evil per se.
Well, I don't like that sentence,
Well,
but I know what you're trying to say.
What I'm trying to say is we sin all the time.
Yeah.
But we're not inherently. We're not.
Well, I'm going to pause you there because
Okay.
there's another rabbit hole that we're not going to go down. So, what I want to be careful about here is saying that the four horsemen are... This is going to be hard. Crux to Ligorum stuff about to happen. He knows what I'm talking about. The four horsemen are under the command and direction of Satan. That is giving Satan too much power.
Yeah, isn't he kind of a pussy?
Right, and he's a wimp, and he's a liar and a deceiver. He
Yeah.
pretends to have power. We're going to get to that with the dragon.
Yeah, he tricks people.
Right.
Sometimes people submit to him involuntarily. He has strings.
Yeah, no, and you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Okay, here's what I'm dancing around. You ready for me to just jump on the landmine?
Satan to sin.
there's that. The 7 seals and the 7 trumpets and everything. Well, jumping on the landmine, you ready? We need to recognize that there is at least an element of God's judgment against sin here. That is not to say Hitler and Stalin are agents of God's judgment. No. That is wrong. A wrong way to think about it. But
although God can use evil.
right. God makes use of evil. Right, man. We're dancing on landmines here. At this point, we are not ascribing any of this to Satan, right? Don't worry, we will talk about Satan in this class, right? I know I keep saying things like, oh, we're not dealing with the Antichrist. Satan will directly and specifically come up. But we're not there. And so let's not give Satan any more power than we can and recognize that maybe this is a...
Think of the horseman as a fertilizer for the harvest.
Let's do it this way. Let's say that this is right, and oh man, problem of evil. Could God end all suffering now?
Yeah.
Right. No, I'm not going to ask the next question because that's problem of evil, and I don't have an answer for it. God does not. Right. I'm not going to ask why because I don't know.
Because he wants to give everybody.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes.
Part of his plan.
Probably.
You're not wrong, but this is. I'm not going to solve the problem of evil here. Let's just say that. I'll let Joe do that in Thursday class. You can become the heretic, not me.
Promotion.
Yeah, promoted to heretic. Only heretics have solved the problem of evil.
Or
no, so. The fact that sin is still ravaging the world is an aspect of God's judgment against sin. Right? The wages of sin is death, and in a evil, wicked acts, Babylon sort of way, tyrants serve that purpose. They're not agents of God. They're also not agents of Satan. Right? I think let's ascribe the agency here, if we need to ascribe it to anyone, to ourselves. Right? This is the mess that we have made, and it's going to continue. God will not stop it until the end. Right? We'll get there. But we do, like I said, I have an exit ramp, so we don't need to rush. But I do want to push past the white horseman. The horsemen could go together, and so I think we will understand the white horseman more as we look at the red, the black, and the pale. So let's. I'm just gonna push us through to the next one, and I'm pushing. We can come back if we need to. But let's talk about the red horseman, because the red and the white horseman are why I got on Jeff for being extremely particular about something he said. Right. So let's look at the red horseman. When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come!" And out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth, so that people should slay one another, and he was given a great sword. All right, red horseman. Red makes you think of what? Blood, and that's intentional here. He's given a big old sword, which helps. And what does he bring? Right. So the first horseman brings tyranny and conquest. The red horseman, close in its wake, brings violence and war, death, destruction, killing of all kinds. Right. So this isn't just wars, although that's a rather large aspect of it. This is all unjust killing, as Brighton says. This is warfare and slaughter. This is the sword of conquest and death. This horseman brings bloodshed in its wake, right? And what we're going to recognize, and we'll go through all four of these, is that one of the horsemen, like I said, leads into the next. So tyranny and conquest, all the guys I listed, right? Attila, Genghis, Adolf, Hitler, Stalin, and all the other ones that are going through your mind, right? Put Napoleon in there too. All of these. What do they all also have in common?
They died by the sword.
Lots of wars, right? It is hard for, not impossible, but it's hard for tyranny to exist, and conquest certainly to exist without war, death, destruction. It is almost impossible for tyranny to exist without killing. I suppose there's a theoretical way, but it gets there real quick, right? We can think Lenin, right? There's no revolution without terror. Terror is necessary. Which one of my historians that I listened to said, I'm not sure about that one, Lenin. But terror, right? This is war, killing, death, destruction, bloodshed, right? This is, right? When was the last time in human history that there was no war? There's a strange statistic out there, and it's going to blow your minds if you've never heard it before, and it is absolutely true. The 20th century, are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Was the most peaceful century in human history. That's the one with World War I, World War II, right? Because we're Americans, Vietnam, Korea. Let's go the other way around, all right? The first Gulf War, at least.
Cold War.
Right, well, the Cold War was cold, right? But there's a lot of war. And now, this doesn't count death toll, right? The 20th century was not the lowest death toll. But that's only because there weren't many people around before. I mean, that has a lot to do with why the death tolls were so high. But by and large, there was more peace over more percentage of the earth in the 20th century than in any century preceding it, as far as the written historical record goes, which is absolutely insane. I mean, it is, right? The prevalence of war in human society post-fall is almost constant. And war brings all of its ravages, right? It brings, as far as the Red Horseman is concerned, death and devastation. And the devastation leads us into the Black Horseman, right? When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a black horse, and its rider had a pair of scales in its hand. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine." Now, before we begin here, verse 6, I'm not touching. Do you know why I'm not touching it? How many pages in Brighton's commentary does he spend talking about this? Oh, no. I have a different memory. Maybe it's the classic. Brighton goes on and on and on about this in his. It must be in his class if he doesn't talk about it.
I was thinking about that thick.
Oh, it's that thick. Okay. And I think this is a place where the editors of this study have done a fantastic job of dropping all of that. So Brighton, and we're going to see a couple places where this happens. I have one that I have identified in here. Brighton has wonderful rules for interpreting Revelation, right? This isn't specific. It's general. It's the human condition from the ascension to the return of Christ. And then do you know what Brighton spends a lot of his time doing? Absolutely breaking all of his rules and saying, oh, this is about the inflation in the 1930s. And you're thinking, Brighton, stop, right? You're breaking your own rules here. What exactly this means about the cost of bread, which is hilarious, by the way, because some people will say, right, a quart of wheat for a denarius, and half of the commenters say this is exorbitant inflation. No one can afford anything. And other people say, well, wheat was super cheap. And you're thinking, like nobody even agrees on what direction this is going. So we're not, shortage is the point. We're not going to deal with those verses and trying to parse out what the oil and the barley and the wine, I'm not dealing with that. Let's deal more general. The Black Horseman comes, and he brings famine. He brings need. And let's see, I had 3. And exploitation. By the way, this is what I think that market value part, if you will, of this is about. Certainly the scales indicate some aspect of trade is involved here. And so you kind of have 2 directions that you can approach this, both of which I think apply to the grand scheme of human history. One is, what do armies do historically
March.
when they march through different areas? They take the crops, right? One of two things happens to crops during warfare before the 20th century, even in the 20th century. On the one hand, if there are crops in the field that the army's marching through, guess whose crops those are now? They ain't yours. The other thing is, guess who's marching through those fields as soldiers? The farmers. Guess what's happening to their crops back home? They're dying.
Yeah.
Well, depending on whether or not they're being raided or not. They're dying. They're being unharvested, right? War brings famine. Honestly, we're seeing this. Globalism has lessened the blow, but the war in Ukraine, you know what Ukraine is known as? The breadbasket of the world, right? Some huge percentage of the world's wheat is grown in Ukraine. This is a problem, right? It's primarily a problem for Africa, right? This made the news recently when, anyway, we don't need to deal with that. But the war in Ukraine has significantly affected food in Africa.
Yeah.
Because pillaging and, wheat doesn't grow too well when a bomb gets dropped on it, right? These sorts of things. And so we see, just by the action of tyrants and wars, famine almost always follows in its wake. We can also see, and I do think this is an aspect here, profiteers, right? Remember, Iron Man's a little bit different. How did Iron Man, Tony Stark, get his money, his fortune? War profiteering. Now, he's selling weapons, right? But it's the same sort of idea. It's like, ooh, we got a shortage. Guess what? I got a store. Right? I got a storage of wheat. Come on, who's paying up, right? And so we see exploitation of the needy here as well. Whichever direction we're coming from brings famine, right? So we have tyranny, war, and famine, right? And this, by the way, the black horseman is the one that we kind of say, well, famine, that's not a human causing problem. Like, humans don't create famines. Famines just happen. Well, in this case, these are famines that are not a result of lack of rain, but are a result of human actions, if you will. So we still are falling in our category here. And then finally, and by the way, the same is going to be true of the pale horse, right? When he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed him. And they were given authority over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword and with famine and with pestilence and by wild beasts of the earth. The pale horse is, generally speaking, death. You'll often in art see a familiar character riding on this pale horse. It's the good old Grim Reaper is very frequently depicted on top of this horse. This is the horseman of death. Right, so we have the horseman of tyranny, horseman of war, horseman of famine, and the horseman of death, right? And this death also comes in the form of pestilence, right? Disease. And we still have some of these post-war, in the wake of war sort of issues, right? I mean, name an army that hasn't had a pandemic within it. There are not very many of them. Disease follows armies for all sorts of reasons. And so we have Death, who is given authority to just kill. Right? So if the tyrants didn't get you, if the war didn't get you, if the famine didn't get you, here comes the Grim Reaper. He's after you. Right? It doesn't kill everyone. Right? It's authority over a quarter of the earth, which is a lot. But remember, I think that's meant to be, it's not 25%. Right? In which case, the Black Death would have been weird, because depending on where you were, it was a third to a half of the world's population died in the Black Death. The second Black Death. The first and the third were not quite as bad. So we're not looking at a percentage, but people survive, right? Death doesn't get everyone. There's hope, right? Not everyone will die. There will be people around at the end of the world when Christ returns, right? It's not that everyone will be dead, although it's looking pretty grim in a lot of these areas. And so we see, we see tyranny, which leads to bloodshed, which leads to famine, which leads to death, right? Death, pestilence, all of these sorts of things. All right, I said we'd come back to questions. So, are there any questions on the four horsemen or anything else that we want to deal with for the four horsemen here?
If I'm understanding you, all this is due to mankind, it's not supernatural.
Right, so don't worry. We'll get to how nature is killing people too, right? Just in case you thought it was only man. No, the seven seals focus on the suffering and the tribulations that are a result of the actions of humanity. Now, to your point earlier, Angie, the faithful, which I guess is a good thing to call them here, are wrapped up in all of this. But at least here, at least I don't see a targeting of the faithful. So we're not looking necessarily at religious oppression specifically. That will come. We will get a focus on oppression. But we do see that the saints of God, and just in case you're about to jump to the fifth seal on me, the saints of God are suffering through this. Their suffering is real. It is caused by this. It just happens to be common with mankind. However, there's a difference in that mankind has no hope, whereas the Christians will, the faithful will have hope. And that is what we're about to get into here, right? So, first four seals, no hope, right? We're not in a good situation. The only kernel of hope we have is that there are some people who make it through all of this. Though there aren't many, right? And it's probably not great for those who do. People do make it through the tribulation, right? Yes, okay. Good. Anything else on the four horsemen before we sally forth, I suppose? All right, may I have a volunteer to read the rest of the chapter? So, 9 through 17.
I will.
Thank you, Kathy.
When he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the witness they had borne. They cried out with a loud voice, O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you will judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? Then they were each given a white robe and told to rest a little longer until the number of their fellow servants and their brothers should be complete, who were to be killed as they themselves had been.
I told you to go to the end of the chapter and applause you there. Let's deal with the fifth seal. Here we go. Here we have the martyrs of the faith. These are those who had been slain for the specific and express purpose of the Word of God, right? So, and this is a bit of a soapbox of mine. This is not, oh man, I lost out on a business deal because they found out I'm a Christian. This is not, oh, I got canceled, although I hate that phrase. If you want more on my insights on things like phraseology like that, we can talk. This is not, oh, people don't like me because I'm a Christian, right? That's a suffering for your faith, right? That might be, as Pastor Jordan said, that might be some level of a cross to bear. That's not this. These are people who have died, right? Where are the saints of God?
Everywhere?
Where are the saints of God in these particular
Underneath the
verses?
altar.
They're underneath the altar, right? This is the altar in the heavenly throne room. These are the martyrs. Now, as an aside that we're not going to deal a ton with here, this is, and you ready for a problematic statement, one of my proof texts for the intermittent state. And how I view Sheol and things like that. Now, why is that a problematic statement? Oh, because this is a book with antilegomena, so I'm not allowed to use this as a proof text. Which is why I am always very, this is my thoughts, my opinions, and I'm not saying, this is doctrine, right? This is one of those, I take information from here, and this is, Revelation in general, even if it weren't antilegomena, is really tricky for assisting with doctrine because it's symbolic. But this, by the way, is one of my proof texts for how I view Sheol in particular. But
How do you what?
Sheol, this understanding of the intermittent state. There is, are you ready for the shameless plug? There's a class on the YouTube called After Death. It's under Rivercliff Replay or Rewind or something like that. It's alliteration with the letter R, where I talk about what happens, in my opinion, when you die. It is, or after you die, right? After death. It was very clever, right? AD, right? That's Anno Domini anyway. But it kind of deals with what happens. Sheol, S-H-E-O-L. It's an Old Testament term. Means the pit. Anyway.
Okay. That was my question.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that.
No, that's good. So we see, regardless of what exactly is happening, we see the martyrs, specifically of the faith, those who have died on account of the word of God and for the witness they had borne, right? You all know who I'm about to mention. Polycarp, he's there. Right? All the martyrs are there, and they're specifically the ones being addressed in this particular case. And what are they doing? Right? Waiting for what?
The return of Jesus.
They are waiting for the return of Jesus, although they don't phrase it that way. That is what they're asking for. But what are they waiting to happen when Jesus returns?
When the earth will be judged, when they'll be avenged, so to speak.
How long until you give them their comeuppance, right? I've given you the quote from Justin Martyr, right, that I really like. I may or may not have, right? He's writing to the Caesar about how he should let Christians be in his empire because Christians are good citizens, and basically he ends it by saying, right, Christians are good citizens, let us exist, don't persecute us, but if you do, Jesus will go get you, right? I'm not worried about it. That's what this is, right? And we recognize that God will take vengeance on the persecutors of his church. Now, that is not to say that persecutors cannot be forgiven or anything like that, but the saints are waiting, right? And they're a little impatient, right? They're saying, come on, God, how much longer do we have to wait here? How much longer until the end when you avenge our blood, when you return in your glory, right? They're anxiously awaiting the return of Christ, right? Question on the fifth seal. All right, believe it or not, we're doing okay. All right, now for the rest of the chapter. Kathy, can you finish it off for us?
Sure.
When he opened the sixth seal, I looked and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth, and the full moon became like blood, and the stars in the sky fell to the earth, as a fig tree sheds its wicked fruit when shaken by a gale. The sky vanished like a scroll, but the scroll that is being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Then the kings of the earth, and the great ones, and the generals, and the rich and the powerful, and everyone, slave and free, hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains, calling to us from the face of him who seated, calling to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who's seated on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand?
All right, I promise. And it just happened. The world just ended. The sixth seal is the end of the world, right? The world has ended and the Lamb has come, right? And there are two reactions. One that we actually see and the other which is implied, right? The reaction we see is the reaction of the wicked. In the great and terrible day of the Lord, on the day of the Lord's return, when the Lamb comes back to the earth, what do the wicked do? They try to hide, right? They say, mountains, come fall on us. That's our best bet, right? They flee from the Lamb. So the wicked, at the end of the age, at the return of Christ, the wicked flee from the Lamb, just as, or I guess counter to, the righteous, the saints, who constantly flee to the Lamb. Right? So the Lamb, who is this image of terror for the wicked, is an image of peace and salvation to the righteous. And so in this sixth seal, at the end of chapter 6, the world is over. Right? Christ has returned. Right? And this is why we have the cyclical nature that's going on here. But the world's done. Christ has returned. John could end right here. He doesn't, and we'll talk about chapter 7 and what's going on in chapter 7, because John kind of pushes a little bit more. And what we'll see with our cycles is the cycles kind of get us going. They start with the ascension, and they go in the first cycle to the end, and then John gets like a peak, and then he backs back up. And then in the next cycle, he'll get to the end, and then he'll look a little bit further, and then he'll back all the way back up. And then there's an interlude that we'll get to. And then in the final vision, we're starting closer, and we got the end, and then we got more, and now John sees this image of eternal life, right? So as the cycles go on, they progress the story further and further. But what we need to remember is that back up still happens. The rewind button is still hit, right? So next week, we're going to start all over again. And the world's going to end again, right? The world ends more than once in the book of Revelation. This is one of these major points of confusion where people get lost in the book, right? Because you look at this and you say, well, Jesus just came and is judging the wicked. But if I keep looking, if I go further, we got all sorts of other stuff happening on the earth when people are there before Jesus comes back. Satan, he has to have his little season, right? There's no beast. Avenged Sevenfold hasn't made their best song yet, right? All that kind of stuff. By the way, that's a music reference. Thank you.
This is like the short version.
Kind of, right? And remember, as John does his repeats, he's focusing on different things. And he's showing us more and more of the picture as he goes along, too, right? So, we have seen the entirety of human history from the ascension through to the return of Christ. It's already happened. And the world's already over, right? We can stop, but we're not going to because John has more to tell us. God has more to say, right? So it's as if the author here, it's as if the book says, look at all of this. Look at how much destruction man causes. Look at the judgment that will come after the waiting of the saints. Look at the hope of the saints, which we're going to see here in just a little bit. And then John goes, oh, I've seen it all. And God says, no. We're going to start over. Now look again, right? And look and see all the destruction and the suffering that comes as a result of nature, right? And then look and see the judgment at the end. And then look and see this picture of eternity, right? And John goes, I see it all. And then God says, hold on, I got more to show you, right? You can almost think of it like a movie, right? You watch a movie the first time and you get the plot, right? And you go, okay, I know the movie. I know where it's going, all of that. You watch it the second time through, and you have those moments where you go, oh, I know what's happening, right? I see what you did there. And then you watch it a third time, and you see all the little hidden jokes that the director put in. It's like, that's funny, right? No, that's not how this works. But the more you look at the same thing, the more you see. And that's what's happening here. We're looking at the same period in history, in a very general sense, in a very symbolic sense, more than once, to see different aspects of it, different things that are going on. All right, questions before we look into this interlude, forward-reaching thing that is chapter 7.
So, do we make anything out of I know this is a vision, but the sun turning black and the moon looking like blood and all this stuff. Is there anything to all that? There's probably more to it. The short version is when Christ returns, heaven and earth pass away, and Jesus is going to remake them. He hasn't done it yet, right? We don't see in this vision. We don't see the new heavens and the new earth, but we do see the earth passing away, and I think that's probably the easiest way to view this. The sun turns black, the moon turns blood red, right? The mountains start crashing on people, and the world is dying. Yeah, the world is passing away so that Christ might recreate it. Although we haven't gotten there yet, but that's, I think, the short version of all of that. I'm going to read our next section. If you're looking at your notes, they've completely left this out. There's a very specific reason we're not going to leave this section out, because the 144,000 confuse a lot of people, especially the Jehovah's Witnesses. Not to just flat out call them out,
But the Jehovah's Witnesses have really, really screwed this section up. And so let's get a good understanding of what's happening. And I'm going to read it, that way I can kind of paraphrase the later section, right? After this, I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth, so that no wind might blow on the earth or the sea or against any tree. Then I saw another angel ascending from the rising of the sun with the seal of the living God. This is different than the 7 seals of the scroll, right? He's got a stamp, okay? With the seal of the living God, and he called with a loud voice to the 4 angels who had been given the power to harm the earth and the sea, saying, do not harm the earth or the sea or the trees until we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. And I heard the number of the sealed, 144,000, sealed from every tribe of the sons of Israel, 12,000 from 12 different tribes, which is a weird list, and we're not getting into what makes it weird, right? If you want to, you can look through and notice, oh, Dan's not there. I wonder why Dan isn't there, and that kind of stuff. I think Ephraim is the other one that's missing. And then there's a tribe of Joseph. Basically, Dan and Ephraim, big idolaters in the Old Testament. It's where the idols were placed at the spring in the kingdom. So they get left out. But that's not the major thing we're dealing with here. So, before the earth gets destroyed, an angel comes in and hits the pause button, basically. Says, stop! We can't destroy the earth yet. I got something I need to do first. I need to take my stamp and put stamps on 144,000 foreheads. Right? He needs to put the seal of God, right? This is big wax seal, right? Very medieval Renaissance, right? Signet ring sort of thing, right? God needs to put his mark on 144,000 saints. Now, as with the rest of the book of Revelation, this number is not literal. Right? This is a symbolic number. Let's figure it out. And we're going to do this with everyone's least favorite subject, math. I know it's not everyone's least favorite subject. You probably don't mind math either. Yeah. I was told that the math portion of my GRE did not count, so I'm okay with that. All right, 144,000. How do we get that number? Well, we need to multiply five numbers together. See, math, not great. The first two are 12 and 12, and then 10 and 10 and 10. So here we go. 144,000 equals 12 times 12 times 10 times 10 times 10. And then we could, but we've already done this, break this either the 12s into 3 and 4, right? The number 12 is symbolic of what? We know this one already. 12 tribes of Israel and the 12 disciples. That's how they appear as the elders. That's how we get the 24 elders. We get the 12 times 12 here. Old Testament and New Testament people of God. Right? The people of God before the cross, the people of God after the cross. Right? So all of the people of God. Alright? That's not hard. Right? So we got 12 and 12, which equals 144. See, I actually know that one. I don't know why. 12 times 12. I do it before this. 12 times 12 is 144. Well, we're 1,000 short, right? 3 orders of magnitude off here. And we get that with 10, 10, 10, right? The number 3 we know. What is the number 3? Trinity. This is God's number, right? This is a godly number. What about 10? We haven't run into 10 yet. And we don't break 10 up at all. 10 is 10.
So many fingers I have.
You know what, Katie? This is actually the correct answer. Believe it or not. 10 is completion. Right? Because once you get to 10, you start over. Right? 11, right? And this is the decimal system, all that good stuff. Right? And so we have completion, completion, completion. Totality, totality, totality. 3 times this is God's completion. Right? By the way, we're going to see the number 1,000 again later in the 1,000 years. This is the totality of the time frame of God, right? We don't need to get goofy or spooky, although when the camera's off, I'll tell you a fun way to poke at people a little bit with this one. One of my professors left. It's great. But we have, in this case, it's not time, it's a number, right? So this is the totally complete godly number of his people. Right? So the 144,000 are not the 144,000 most holy people who've ever lived. Thank God, because that's not much, right? I'm not making it on that list. I'll tell you that for free. Right, there are, 3 billion Christians in the world right now? If only 144,000 of them are real, completely discounting all the ones who have died so far, we're toast. Right? At least I am. I don't know about you. I haven't done private confession with most of you. So we have the complete and total number of God's people. That is who is sealed. Now, I want to make one more driving point, and where this comes from is going to be seen in comparison to the rest of this chapter. And so this driving point is, who are these 144,000? Because they are the one. Where are they?
The throne room.
No, these are not in the throne room, but good.
They're on the earth.
They're on the earth, good. They're still on the earth when the world ends, right?
Okay.
We have a name for Christians who are on the earth, saints of God who are on the earth. What is that name? November's coming up, guys.
Lutherans.
Oh, Tom! Yes! I love it. Lutherans. You're on fire. I like it. Oh, that was good. The other technical term. This is the church militant, right? And so, as of right now, you all are here.
Churchers.
Yes. The church militant is the church that is still on earth struggling. Right? Struggling against the 4 horsemen. Right? Struggling against all of these other things that we're going to see in Revelation. This is the church that is still in tribulation. Right? You're part of that. And, let's see, Joe, I don't see a stamp on your head. What's up with that? Where's your stamp? Oh, okay. What is this stamp? What's this seal that God has sealed on your forehead? Baptism, right? You're sealed upon your forehead and upon your heart to mark you as one redeemed by Christ the crucified, right? The seal that God has placed on you is the seal of baptism. He has made you his own. And it doesn't come up here. The 144,000 sealed pop back up later in the book of Revelation, and they are the ones that the angels protect. Right? The angels defend them. Right? They also, some not great things kind of happen to them too, but we all know that we suffer in this world. That's not a surprise to us. And it won't be when the 144,000 come back up. But the 144,000 is the church militant, the church here on earth. Everyone sitting in this room. Right? We are all part of the church militant. We're all part of this 144,000. For the sake of time, I will finish off the chapter. Yes. And we'll see if we get through the last section of 8. Well, here, hold on. I have a lot of things written down. No, okay, that's all for the next section. After I saw the 144,000, I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes with palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, "Salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb." And all the angels were standing around the throne and around the elders and the four living creatures, and they fell on their faces before the throne and worshiped God, saying, Amen. Blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might be unto our God forever and ever. Amen. Then one of the elders addressed me, saying, Who are these, clothed in white robes, and from where have they come? I said to him, Sir, you know. And he said to me, These are the ones coming out of the great tribulation. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore, they are before the throne of God and serve him day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne will shelter them with his presence. They shall hunger no more, neither thirst anymore. The sun shall not strike them, nor any scorching heat, for the Lamb in the midst of the throne will be their shepherd. And he will guide them to springs of living water. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. By the way, all of you who went to the funeral planning seminar, this is the best funeral text. You can pick whatever one you want. You can pick the mansion one. It's very nice. You can also pick Zephaniah, which is my second favorite one. It's in the packet that got handed out because I crammed it in there. Because guess who put that packet of verses together? Anyway.
I have a question.
Yes.
And I'm kind of backing up a little bit. But
No, this is good.
To the 144,000.
Yes.
And then there's a mention further on about the tribulation. So who do we really think these 144,000 sealed are? Because that's not very many people if you look at it.
Yes. Oh, this is good.
From a broad perspective.
This is good, right? The 144,000, my argument is that they are the church militant. So currently, the 144,000 are all of you.
They're all black.
All y'all, right? We're in the South. You gotta say all y'all. They're all the saints who are currently alive and still struggling, which includes you. It included John at one point in time. When John saw this, he was part of that 144,000. He's not part of it anymore. Right? So after this after I saw the church militant, I'm paraphrasing here my version. After I saw the 144,000, the church militant, I looked and behold a great multitude that no one could count. Right? The bigger number. Where are there more saints of God right now?
Heaven.
Well, this is acceptable.
Church?
They are in the presence of Christ, right? They are in the church triumphant, right? So these are the ones who have come out of the Great Tribulation and are now with Christ, right? So John is there, right? You see him? He's right there. It's hard. There's a lot of them there, right? Everyone you know who has died in the faith is in that crowd, right? I'm very pleased at where we are. Everyone who's buried in our memorial garden right now, we just saw them. This is the church triumphant. These are all the saints of God, right? They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Baptism, same thing links us, right? They are now before his throne, right? So yes, the 144,000 is a small number. It's because it's only the saints who are currently alive. Those massive multitude that no one can count, right? Well, they're the church that is with Christ currently. This is the church triumphant, right? This is what we celebrate on All Saints' Day. In fact, I think this is an All Saints' Day reading, is it not? Yes. We read this on All Saints' Day because we see that John is seeing here a picture, right? Moses, he's there, right? Everyone in the Old Testament, well, not everyone in the Old Testament, right? All the saints of the Old Testament, right? Everyone that's mentioned in Hebrews, the Hall of Faith, they're there. Your great-great-grandparents, they're there, presumably, right? I don't know your family history, right? Martin Luther, he's there. Polycarp, I gotta mention Polycarp as much as possible. He's there, right? Athanasius, all these guys, right? All the men and women of faith who have died in the faith and are now resting with Christ, the church triumphant, that's who John sees, right? And he sees this image of paradise, right? This presence with God. Now, the world hasn't been remade yet. We get that later, right? We have a beautiful picture, 15 through 17. These are the saints who are with God. This is the church triumphant. These are, we see the white robes of baptism, the palm branches. These are the victorious martyrs. These are the people that we saw in the fifth seal. Now they're with the palm branches. They're the victorious martyrs. These are the ones who have gone through the Great Tribulation and come out the other side. Now, before we go on, before I take any questions, I need you to look in your books at the point for chapter 7, verse 14. Right? So this is in the handout, chapter 7, verse 14. And I need you to cross that out because Brighton is wrong. Right?
The whole paragraph?
Probably. So this is what Brighton says. Remember when I said Brighton can get frustrating sometimes because he doesn't follow his own rules? The fact that the tribulation here is called great seems to indicate that it is the worst of the common tribulations that all Christians in general. No! This is not a particular tribulation. It's called the Great Tribulation because it's the tribulation that we all face, right? I said Brighton is breaking his own rule here, right? So why can I be so confident? Because I'm not always confident when I say Brighton's wrong, right? I typically say, I disagree with Brighton, he's probably right. Here, I disagree with Brighton, he was right, and then he got it wrong. And you know what? Brighton's in this host glorious right now, and so he is okay with me saying this. But no, the Great Tribulation is called great because it is the tribulation from the ascension to the return of Christ. It's not an individual. It's not an individual tribulation. It's not some special tribulation that we should be looking for, right? Ooh, is the tribulation gotten bad enough for it to be called great? No, stop looking for events like that because that's not the point, right? In fact, it's diametrically opposed to the point, right? What does Jesus say? No one knows the day or the hour. So stop trying to figure it out. Because if you're trying to figure it out, you know what you're really trying to do? You're trying to say, how much time do I have left?
I'm sorry, God.
That's not what we're doing, right? We are to wait. Christ should return at any moment. We need to be ready. And so if we're saying, ooh, well, the tribulation's bad, but it's not great, right? Because, and let me tell you this, right? You all know I'm a history person. Our tribulation is not the worst in the church as it has been historically. I have more than 5 examples of when it was worse to be a part of the church, especially for Americans, right? That being said, there are people right now who have it as bad as any Christian has ever had it because of a particular instance that they're in. But generally speaking, across the world on average, life is pretty good for Christians right now. It may not always be that way. I'm not worried about it. Why? Because the Lamb's on the throne. I'm sealed. Right? We got that stamp on our forehead. We'll be fine. Right? And that's kind of the point. That is the point. Is you're part of the 144,000. You will one day be part of that great multitude. You don't need to worry about what mankind in this particular case is going to throw at you. Because Christ has you. He has sealed you. You are part of the you will be part of the great multitude one day. It is a certainty, right? Just as certain as it was that Jesus was never capable of sin, it is just as certain that you who have been sealed by the Lamb will be in his kingdom if you remain faithful, right? That is, by the way, the overall message of the book of Revelation. It is, guys, it's gonna be bad here. It's gonna really be rough. There are all sorts of ways. Let me list them. How it's going to be rough for you. But Jesus is on the throne. That's why I said that this Christ's ascension into the throne room is the core of the book of Revelation. If you miss the fact that Jesus already, past tense, rules and reigns, then you miss the rest of the point, which is that, hey, Jesus is in control, even though we are suffering. Even though we are being oppressed, even though we are going through tribulation, Christ is still in control and he still has you. He still cares for his saints. And he will see you through to the white multitude. Questions? All right. We actually did pretty well. We got 5 minutes, so I'm going to let you go early today, probably. We still have one seal to go. That is the 7th seal. The seals function, and you can see that in the graph that's early in the packet. The 7 seals function slightly differently than the trumpets and the bowls, in that the 7th seal is a transition seal. There's no big revelation that happens. There's no big image or there's some symbolism, but the function from a literary standpoint of the 7th seal is to take you from the 7 seals back into the next vision, which is that vision of the 7 trumpets. So we'll talk about that next week as we hit the 7 trumpets. Good. Questions? All right, look at that. 5 minutes early. Finally. It was a short class today. Let's say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you all. I will see you next week for the 7 trumpets.